Thank you. Thank you very much, in particular to Dunamu for inviting us and for this fantastic event that you've put together. My name is Muriel Medard. I hold the NEC chair for Software Science and Engineering for the entire School of Engineering at MIT. I'm a professor in electrical engineering and computer science and lead the network coding and reliable communications group for a couple of decades now. I'm on leave now. I'm co-founder and CEO of Optimum, a company that does spin out from MIT in the area of decentralized, fast data propagation and access. So I was asked by the organizers to cover a little bit of decentralization from scratch. And I think, I liked very much Sasha's presentation about the why, because, why decentralization? Why are we looking at decentralization? And I would say blockchain is one, probably right now, maybe the most exciting or well-known aspect of decentralization, but decentralization is really much broader than that. So there are pluses to decentralization. This is the core of the why. There's no single control point. You can look at this as a basically philosophical approach that you want there to be no control point. But it also is a practical aspect. There's a pragmatic aspect there in the fact that if there's no control point, you can really make all resources that are available useful in real time. The problem, and we've heard about reliability, is how do you make a system that is reliable? And in particular, can you mimic the consistency of a completely centralized system in the context of the decentralized one? So can you look like you're centralized even though you're not? And I was really happy to hear earlier in the excellent session that we had on stablecoins about the plug, because it was a plug for my plug here. And I think if you look in technology, and as by background, I'm an information theorist, but I always think of myself as an electrical engineer first. If you look at the technological networks that have had real perennity, that have had staying power, they have had a plug. And in order to really make use of those networks, you need a standard interface that hides entirely what's behind it. And let's look at the networks that we have had that have really had staying power. First, we have the plug, the socket for the electric grid. And then we have in Web 2, what some of you may be familiar with is also a socket. It's actually technically called a socket, which is called TCP/IP. And what does this do? What does this do for us? So what is a socket? So a socket is an abstraction that makes a decentralized network look to you like a dedicated resource. So for the electric grid, the entire messy infrastructure that is the electric grid, which may have solar panels, may have coal-powered plants, may have nuclear plants, may have who knows what, looks to you like a battery. It looks to you like your own dedicated battery. In Web 1 and Web 2, what it looks like to you is like a dedicated link. So for instance, if I'm talking over Zoom with somebody, I cannot tell just from the behavior of the connection that it's a connection over Web 2 or Web 3, or whether that is actually just a dedicated point-to-point link. Now, in my head, of course, I know that I don't have a single dedicated fiber, but it all looks the same. That's actually what we're doing in Optimum for Web 3 is we're doing read, write, and have a dedicated apparent memory like you have in your computer, even though it's actually a completely decentralized system. And just to say what it needs, I was really happy to hear earlier talk about atomic. I was very happy to hear Michael Casey talk about atomicity. We need to have a memory that looks like it's just a single piece, where you have consistency and durability. And with that, I'm just going to move on and talk a little bit specifically about DeSci, which is what we've been asked to do. So if we can get to the second set of slides. Excellent, thank you. So the organizers kindly asked me to do a little bit of an introduction on DeSci, and I had to tell you, I was a little nervous because it's such a deep, wide, and rapidly changing field, but I was also very, very excited. So talk a little bit to you about just a broad brushstrokes DeSci. We've heard a lot today regarding machine learning, AI. I tend to call it machine learning. That's definitely how we generally call it at MIT, certainly when we teach it, and particularly in science. And so, let's start with the why, like Sasha told us. Why should we do decentralization for science? Well, we saw before, we have pluses. It would be wonderful to use multiple data sets across the world, make use of all the resources that we have for computation, all the data resources. Problems. How do you, again, create something that's reliable? How do you manage privacy concerns? And that's both for proprietary data and also for data that may be regulated specifically in the medical domain. How do I have something decentralized where the accuracy of the computation can be ensured? And again, how can I mimic the consistency of a centralized system with one database, one massive Mongo computer in the context of a decentralized one? So when we talk about learning from decentralized data, you generally have this idea of the data owners. Here I show hospitals to think of something that has data which is highly regulated. And what you like to do is train your models on this data. Now, first of all, there are many different things that you can say about training. One of the things we think in particular in blockchain is finality. One of the things to think about in machine learning is that you can trade off time and accuracy. So you can have decentralized data where you basically decide that you're not just going to finish the job, but you're going to go until you feel that you've done a good enough job. And I give you here an example with adorable kitty cats. But basically, that's a very that's a very DeSci type of approach where you may decide not to just run a job, but just keep learning and stopping and seeing where you're at. Now, there's a different kind of learning also that I'd like to make a difference between. So in here, what you have is you have different data, and you can use something like Optimum, we just saw before, to sort of make all of distributed databases look to you like a single, basically atomic memory. However, one of the big pushes currently in machine learning has been around more federated learning. And the idea here is different. The idea here is that you're first distributing the computation. So, what I'm showing there is, in effect, the same model replicated, and you're training in those different locations. And what you're doing by training is effectively usually changing the weights on those different nodes, say, inside a neural network. This may be, for instance, a large language model. And then you're fusing that information into a central data center. This is not decentralized. Actually, this is distributed. Why? Because you still have a coordination. So you have multiple users, multiple players, which is why it is distributed, but it's not decentralized because you still have a coordination, in this case, coming from the right-hand side, from the data center. Truly decentralized learning really involves coding across the entire network. Here I show you some work from our lab where you actually are distributing the computation across everywhere. I just want to touch briefly on privacy. because I think that that's really one of the most difficult items to deal with. And I just want to say that, there's been a lot of discussion. Some of you may have heard about learning on encrypted data, for example, with fully homomorphic encryption. Inherent in any machine learning application is the fact that if you were truly, totally private, you could not learn. Because if you're really leaking no information at all, then whatever you did is useless. Right? You can't learn on something that doesn't leak. And so crucial to machine learning is really, when we're doing this in this distributed or decentralized way, is what we call the privacy utility trade-off. You pick your poison. Do you want to be more useful? Do you want to learn more effectively? Or do you want to be more private? And looking at those trade-offs is actually an extremely active area of research. And with that, I'll hand it over to my co-panelists, and then we'll go into discussion.
Sure. So, hi everyone. So my name is Roland. I'm the CEO, co-founder of aiotek's. So we are the largest, the DePIN infra providers, for the DePIN project, right? So if you happen to know DePIN, actually my team put on the slides here. Thank you. So if we look at the blockchain space right now, it's pretty small, right? So thanks to the Bitcoin pump in these 2 days, we actually reached a $3 trillion market cap for the entire crypto. But compared to the real world economy, it's still very small. The real world economy is roughly $500 trillion market, right? That means that cares about everybody, like transportation, data, energy consumption, Medicare, so on and so forth. So that's kind of like a real world we're living in. So from day one, aiotek's mission is still trying to kind of having crypto to overflow to the real world. And DePIN, we do think, is kind of way to go. So the full name for DePIN is Decentralized Physical Infra Network. If this is new to you, I think you must have used a Uber, Airbnb, those kind of Web2 share economy applications, which definitely carries a lot of spirit of DePIN. So we have been working with a lot of DePIN projects in the past few years. We are the day one players, in the DePIN space. So in the DePIN space, we definitely see we have a lot of learnings here. So one learning is, because usually for a DePIN project, let's think about the weather station, right? So you want to build a weather protocol, have a weather station distributed in many places, try to collect data so you can doing something on top of the data. That means your project actually involves hardware, software, middleware. You do the data processing, verification, authentication, so on and so forth. So blockchain is a last mile for your DePIN project, right? So that creates a lot of complexity for the DePIN teams. So we have been working with them in the past few years, and we do have this abstraction about an entire tech stack, DePIN, how DePIN should be built. So we want teams to use our a modular infrastructure to quickly prototyping their DePIN ideas and go to market maybe the second day, right? Give it a try. Maybe it's wrong, maybe it's working, who knows, right? Then if it's working, definitely double down, scaling up and growing. And if it doesn't work, try next one. So we want to have this kind of rapid try and error kind of iteration for every DePIN builder. That's exactly what we do. So speaking of the DePIN ecosystem, I think it's kind of growing starting from 1 year ago. So after Solana and Ethereum, aiotek's is a third large DePIN ecosystem in the world. So we actually have 51 projects already building on top of us, and it's an ever-growing number. We have showcasing some of the names here. For example, Network 3, they're very much related to what you're talking about. They're building a decentralized AI, an AGI computing platform. Ubila is actually this weather kind of station company I was using as an example. We have WatchX is a kind of a watch. You can collect your personal data, with privacy preserved computation. You can do something on top of. There are so many of this, so I'm not going into details. So on the other side, we do have a lot of partnership with Filecoin, Espresso, the Graph, so on and so forth, because those are the infra they used to serve for the crypto people, right? So they do indexing, they do data storage, they do this and that, sequencing as well. But we do actually work with them to make them part of like an entire DePIN tech stack, because we have this scenario, which you're talking about like millions of devices, kind of funneling data every second, right? So this is a huge infra. So we're not building it by ourselves. We're building by all the top-notch like partners in the world. So that's kind of like the snapshot of like aiotek's ecosystem. There's many users, there's many projects. So we have also like along this many years, we have like backed by the top-notch investors and VCs. We're also like very actively contributing back to the academic research area. DeSci very much relevant too. So another thing, try to just like briefly mention about is our like a world kind of flagship event about DePIN. We do this almost 3 or 4 times every year. So last one was actually in Singapore, 2014. Yeah, so all in all, I think that's about aiotek's. If you guys want to learn more, definitely like happy to talk. With that, I'm going to pass it to Wilson.
Thank you guys. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Wilson. I'm the co-founder of Cyber. We started as CyberConnect and rebranded to Cyber. So Cyber, it's an Ethereum L2 for social applications, and very soon we're gonna do a lot around AI. I'll tease it later in this very short presentation. So right now we have about more than 100 applications and projects deployed on our chain, and some of them, I'll just name a couple of them, like Galaxy, Layer 3. We work with Layer 0 as well. And also Link 3, of course, we built this in-house 1.5 years ago. And Link 3.2 now has become the most trusted and well-adopted all-in-one link profile and gateway to Web3 projects and creators. So far, we have more than 3,600 projects verified and using this all-in-one link profile. Moving forward, I think this is kind of like an awkward timing. I'd love to tell you more about like what we're going to do in AI, but the official announcement I think is going to come out next year, Q1. So I'll just tease around it. There are a couple very interesting questions that we have been doing research around and developing around. So question number 1 would be like, data, especially real-time data, it's extremely important and valuable for RAG, retrieval augmented generation. And number 1, could those data be generated and collected in a decentralized manner, right? And if so, who should be rewarded, and how the business model should look like? And when creators and websites who are the ones that actually providing those data, how are they rewarded within this data pipeline? Right now, what we have seen in the chatbot AI market is like a lot of those revenue has been cut off, so it's for user who help to collect those data, and for creators and website who generated those data, they've been left out in this economy. Yeah, we'd love to explore more into it, and cannot wait to announce this new picture for Cyber L2 as well. Yep, thank you so much, and let's kick off the discussion.
Thank you both. So we've been actually exchanging some questions and among us, and I'll start with some of those questions that we've been considering. And one of them was, the usual path has been centralized to distributed and distributed to decentralized. Do you think that that's a necessary arc of development? Or if the purpose is to go decentralized, can we go directly to decentralized?
Wilson, want to give a try first?
Yeah, sure. I think to be honest, I thought about this question like last night, and I think I look at things from the use case perspective instead of like centralized and decentralized way. Like for example, like my first startup, we built a live streaming platform, and we wanted to build the whole thing in a decentralized manner. But in fact, in order to acquire user, we need to start like with something we call like progressive decentralization manner, and there will be like a combination with some centralized tech plus decentralization tech, like that settlement layer. Mostly, it's going to be done on the blockchain side, but a lot of the transcoding, CDN stuff are going to still be handled in a centralized manner in that case. But yeah, so I think as long as we start from the use case and have a vision of why in this use case, in this scenario, the ultimate vision of decentralization of this whole thing could be better, I think that's the way to go with it. But along the way, I don't mind to combine the decentralized and centralized tech together, I think. Yeah.
Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, when I think about centralized Web2 social networks, I think they are kind of de facto right now. If you think about Twitter in the United States, Telegram in crypto space, WeChat in China, right? So they're all centralized, and people love it. People love it. Why? Because the users are actually everyday people. They really don't care too much about the underlying technology, that like blockchain or P2P or what type of a high tech. They really don't care. What they want is a very convenient, easy to use, low barrier to entry, sort of like a product. I think in this situation, the product really matters. You have to make the product so easy and so dumb, people can actually use it without any problem. I think that's one reason we don't see too much kind of decentralized social network. Two is about a regulation, right? So if you have an impression, maybe you have two, right? So in the Bitcoin network, there's something called what's the name? From Jack Dorsey. So they have this like a Lightning network sort of thing, for Bitcoin layer 2, right? What's the name? Damas or something, right? But that's kind of like an experiment, upon this decentralized social network. So after launch, there's just a bunch of kind of improper the contents or messages, right? Spammers, people trying to steal money from other people. So those sorts of things also will decrease the user experience very hugely. That prevents a user actually using those things. I feel like it's more about this type of problem that stops this social application to be decentralized.
Yeah. Thank you, and I think you've basically been touching on question 1, which is appearing here. Thank you, whoever posted question 1, which is, despite the rapidly growing awareness of data ownership and increasing privacy regulations, centralized Web2 social networks still dominate the market. What are the reasons behind this? I think you just mentioned some. I don't know, Wilson, if you want to add to that. But I think the second part of the question maybe we can address: how can DeSoc and Web3-based social networks increase their market share? And this is going to actually touch a little bit on one of the questions that also I had sent around, or we were exchanging in our Telegram group, which was, to what extent is it that you're building on top of a decentralized set of tools, or to what extent are you actually yourself building the decentralization?
Yeah, I'll just quickly add on to the last question.
Yeah, please really do.
Quick. I think probably monetization in a massive scale for all the people that involved in a social network is the key to bring decentralized social networks to massive adoption. Mm-hmm. And I think there are a lot of experiments that's happening across the years. But I think we still need to work a lot more on it. And back to your question, we use some the Cyber L tool. It's part of the Optimism superchain ecosystem. So we definitely use some of the existing techs. But meanwhile, we do in-house build a lot of the newer technology. For example, account abstraction when we are doing our own wallet.
To me, I always, ask this question to myself, why decentralization matters, right? Why do we need this technology? I think largely, as far as we can tell from crypto industry in this many 10 years, it's mostly about added censorship and also permissionless, right? So added censorship don't want drill down into this one, but definitely permissionless is kind of way I think tie back to the DeSoc and also a lot of stuff here. Mm-hmm. You want to make a network that have a very low bar to entry, right? So people can just connect their wallet and do something ABC, then everything kind of working at a global scale. I think that's kind of the magic behind this decentralization. Of course, in the meanwhile, you want to make sure it's secure, the data is private, everything is kind of unbreakable.
Reliable.
So I think that's kind of like an essence why decentralization matters. The same thing for social science, because you give this graph, right? You want to collect people's data, their personal data, maybe healthcare data, maybe they're like a ride-sharing data, whatever, right? So then through this network, kind of goes to somewhere. Let's use the data to train like the AI model. Let's try like a large language model, right? So I think this logic totally makes sense. But the tech difficulty, if we use Web 2 technology is, like the loop is just too long, right? So you have a company, here like collecting data. You have a few company here trying to purchase data from people. You do matchmaking in the middle. It's very low efficiency, right? If you look at Elon Musk, they have this like a Dodge, this like a government's efficiency. So I think efficiency is super important. And the permissionless is actually the way leading to the increase of efficiency and actually close the loop really quick.
And that goes back to using all of the resources, that why that we had mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Yeah.
I believe question 2 was up. I don't know if it can be put up again. It was an evanescent question 2. Thank you very much. It says many DeSci platforms are helping uncover hidden scientific ideas and talent. How does DeSci support this uncovering process? That's interesting because I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. I think my thoughts is that the jury's still out, right, on to what extent it's uncovering ideas and talent. I mean, I think that there's some very promising early attempts. I might shout out to the Jamil Clinic at MIT, which is run by, co-run by my friend Regina Barzilay. So they've managed to get a lot of data across many different hospitals in the world for breast cancer, early breast cancer detection. That was definitely, came up with some interesting, very maybe surprising results or unexpected results. So I think that there are some early and very promising examples, but I think it's still very much in its incipient stage. I don't know, Roland, if you think otherwise, or.
I think that there are several things, DeSci makes sense. First one is funding. I have been working on this PhD when I got into Bitcoin. My major is cryptography, right? So I totally understand, for some really good ideas, it's hard to get funding, right?
Yeah.
So, but through this one, like a DeSci, we can easily, issue a token or issue a DAO, whatever. So they're very a flexible funding structure to fund those good ideas. I think that's most important. 2 is like a participation, right? So once you have this kind of DAO setup or token setup, you can easily kind of include people who have a very similar minded or an interest into this idea all together working permissionlessly. Again, permissionlessly is very important. These people may not be in your university, may not be in MIT, so this might be a nobody who's living, I don't know, the other side of the earth, right? Who can work with you on this idea? I think that's kind of making this idea easier to become true. And also, I think certainly it's about a data collection or computation, because those things you have to kind of outsource to everyday people, having them to help you to finish a science project, right? This is usually very hard to be done, in the lab, to be honest, right? So that's why I think, and also it's an open mindset is another way to go. Usually in the research area, so people are very kind of holding back their thoughts because they don't want other people to learn this one or publish a paper before him or her, right? So, but in this DeSci community, everybody have this open source kind of mindset. I think that definitely helps with discussions and everything.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know, Wilson, if you want to add to that.
No, I think Ron, you did a great job explaining it. Incentive, open source, transparency, that pretty much creates a market, a free market of science. So I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, and maybe, I will add my 2 cents to question 2. For several years, actually, I was one of the moderators for Archive, which is, a DeSci of sorts, right? Because basically people post their ideas and, show the priority with a timestamp, and that has become already, to a large extent, a crucial tool in all areas, particularly mathematically oriented scientific discovery. With that, we have 2 seconds to go, and that time's up. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.